Most people who claim to be intellectuals don't actually understand and are ignorant to the facts of Jesus Christ. The actual apologetics that come with Jesus Christ being the Son of God. So, if you think you're an intellectual and you think you're internally consistent, then I challenge you. I want you to listen to this argument because I guarantee this is going to change your mind. This is the case for Christ is strong. It's very strong, especially if you believe other historical things to be true. So, first things first, you have to establish that Jesus Christ was a real person. All right. Christian, non-Christian, and atheist historians all agree that Jesus Christ was a real person. That's a fact. Not only from all the evidence that is brought upon by the Gospels written as historical fact and not legend, you can look at these outside sources like Josephus, who's a Jewish historian around the time, who mentions that Jesus was executed under Pontius Pilate, and the Roman historian Tacitus also records that Christos suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of Pontius Pilate. Whoa. These are true claims that occurred that are recorded in the Bible. And so we have to establish that Jesus Christ was a real person. That's a fact. I'm sorry if you don't think that. You're dumb. You probably don't actually understand a lot, and I'm sorry. But here we are. Jesus Christ was a real person. So then let's also look at some other evidence. So first of all, the Gospels were written decades after Jesus' lifetime, which most scholars debate whether it's between 60 and 90 AD. Mark's even earlier than that. And this is like remarkably early for ancient standards. Whenever things happen, people didn't just like write it down immediately like they do today or record it. Or you go on your news, your Fox News, your CBS, your CNN, other three-letter news agencies. And so this is really remarkable because you have to wonder, why were they so motivated to write this stuff down? Why? And so once you establish that, you're like, they might be onto something here. They might be onto something. And then you have early church writers, so people during the time, right after Jesus Christ's resurrection, you have uniformly reported that the two Gospels, Matthew and John, were written by Jesus' own disciples. So eyewitness accounts who are like watching Jesus do these miracles and then come back after being crucified, write these things down. That's very strong. You trust eyewitness testimonies over anything else. We learned that in school. And then you have Mark's Gospels was based on Peter's eyewitness testimonies, which Peter, who is the rock of the church, the first pope, he was a disciple of Jesus Christ. And Mark wrote down what he saw, or what Peter told him. And so that's an indirect eyewitness account. And then Luke, a companion of Paul, who, if you know anything about the Bible, Paul is one of the most important figures in Christianity other than Jesus Christ. Luke was a companion to him and who also interviewed witnesses. Like at the beginning of his gospel, he's like, I didn't see this firsthand, I'll be honest, but through diligence, I collected eyewitness testimonies and collected all of the evidence for the things that I've written in this gospel. And the things he's written are these miracles, are the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ being the Son of God, God in human form. And all of the tones of the Gospels, they're read as historical biographies. Especially Luke, he took this stuff seriously. He also, I believe, wrote Acts later on, the Acts of the Disciples after Jesus Christ's resurrection. And historians use parts of that to actually piece together history because of how accurate it was. Things that they didn't believe to be true were proven true. And this is consistent throughout the Gospels. It's not written as some mythology or some propaganda. It's written as an actual account of what they witnessed. Especially the pool of Bethesda in John 5, it was thought to be legendary, like it was just legend. But as time went on, humans excavated stuff in Jerusalem and found 5 of them, matching the description. Something they didn't believe to be true that the Bible described actually was true, which adds to the authenticity of the authors. They weren't just making this stuff up, they really witnessed these things. And the Bibles are internally consistent, very very consistent. You see that whenever you examine them side by side, there's like a harmonious overall story, especially Jesus Christ's ministry in Galilee, his teachings, his miracles, his crucifixion under Pontius Pilate, and reports of an empty tomb, and then the resurrection appearances. And yet each writer has a different emphasis on some unique incidents, which you're like, oh, okay, well, obviously they're just telling a story because they're omitting different parts or they're adding different parts. But like, think about this critically for a second. If you have people who are eyewitness testimonies, in quote, giving the exact same bar for bar story, you're going to think they colluded, and you're going to think that they're not actually telling the truth. A Harvard legal scholar, Simon Greenleaf, observed that if multiple eyewitness testimonies to align too perfect, one might suspect collusion. So you don't gotta believe some random guy on the internet. You could believe a Harvard legal scholar. Not making an appeal to authority here, but this guy studies it more than I do, and more than you do. So I would trust his opinion over others. And so then you have that myth and legends usually glorify their heroes. So if Jesus was written as a hero, well, I mean, he kind of is, but written as mythology and a legend, then you would see more glorification of the whole story. Which there's some things in there that wouldn't be added if Christian storytellers were making stuff up and trying to get the story across. Like the women who saw the tomb was empty were the first witnesses, and you wouldn't see that if they were trying to make stuff up, because back then women weren't taken seriously. Their accounts and their testimonies were immediately disregarded because they were women. So you have to ask, if they were making this up, why would they say that women were the first ones to see it? Because if you were talking to someone at this time and you're like, yeah, like this group of women saw that the tomb was empty, and he stops you immediately. He's like, women? Nah, bro, I don't believe you. I don't trust women like that. Because of their prejudice at the time. So you have to ask, why did they say women? Almost like they were telling a true story. And so then you move on to Jesus' death and crucifixion, which is absolutely certain he was crucified under Pontius Pilate, 30 AD. Jesus truly died on the cross. And dude, these guys who crucified him were professionals. They made sure you were dead. Crucifixion is the most brutal way you could be executed ever. You have spikes thrown through your wrists, held up on both sides, and the only reason you die is because your shoulders give out and you suffocate because you can't take any breaths. Your diaphragm is too weak. And so you have this occur, and then you have one of the Roman soldiers put a spike through Jesus' side just to make sure he's dead. And so he dies. Okay. Now it's a historical fact. Jesus Christ died. Which I think this brings up to the important part of the resurrection, which the Christian movement started in Jerusalem. And you see that during this time, whenever Christianity was being spread, that it could have been verified that the tomb wasn't empty and that he was still in there rotting as a corpse. But you don't. This is where it started, in Jerusalem, where he was crucified. And so many people at the time could have said that, like, yo, I see Jesus Christ's body there. The tomb's not empty. What are you talking about? You are lying. You're lying. And so this occurs. The tomb was empty. And then you have Jesus appearing to the disciples. You have this event that occurs where Jesus comes back. He's like, yo, bro, what up? And they're like scared. They think it's a ghost. they don't really understand. Like, even whenever the women first told them, even the disciples themselves were like, I don't believe it, because you're a woman. And so then Jesus is like, all right, I'll do it myself. And then comes back and shows himself to them. You may think, oh, it's just a hallucination. But the 12 people and hallucinations genuinely don't conversate with you or eat with you in physical form. Jesus ate with the disciples. What? That doesn't happen. Especially all of them, you would say they're hallucinating, but experiencing the same hallucination at the exact same time, in the exact same way. That's statistically improbable. And I'm sure you're very smart and you like statistics. So place your bet on it actually happening. How could you say that it didn't, or it was a hallucination? Because all this evidence is stacking up for this is the case. And so they witnessed Jesus Christ be resurrected. And even later, Paul says that Jesus appeared to like 500 people, most of which are still alive, he says at the time, which kind of implies like, yo, bro, you don't believe me? Go find out for yourself. Go ask around, and you will probably find somebody who truly saw him die. And the apostles died for what they saw. If you were lying about what you saw, you wouldn't die for it. Something you knowingly know, that works. Knowingly know is a lie. You know it's a lie. You know it's fake. And yet, you die for it. Why? You must truly believe what you saw for that to be the case. So then you have to ask, okay, like, is this true then? I would say yes, because of all these things that occurred. They gained nothing from this. They gained nothing. They were ostracized. They were beaten. They were tortured, murdered. All 12 disciples, except for one, Judas Iscariot. We don't fuck with that dude. And yet, they still brought it to the grave. That's powerful. You believe a lot of things in your life, but you wouldn't die for it. You wouldn't. I'm sure you have some ideologies that you have that you might believe, but you wouldn't die for it. If you witnessed Jesus Christ resurrecting and knew for a fact that that was the case, you would probably die for that because you understood what he said was true. He proved it. He came back. It's like, yo, oh shit, here we go again. And in front of your face, he comes back in front of your face, and you're like, you didn't even believe it at first. You thought he was a ghost. You didn't believe that the women were telling the truth. And yet here he is. And you have that written in your documents. You have these awkward details and these embarrassing things that you didn't believe that Jesus Christ came back. Even Peter denies Jesus 3 times during his trial. So something miraculous must have happened for him to change his mind, for him to die for this. And then you have other historical evidence of that there was just a sudden change of the followers of Jesus moving the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday. Think about this. You have this tradition for your whole life that Saturday is Sabbath. That's the day for God. You don't disrespect that day because you believe you will be punished for that. And yet you see these people change it to Sunday and worship it on Sunday because Jesus Christ was resurrected on Sunday. And you see all of these early churches growing at the time. 50 days, the Church of Pentecost appeared 50 days after Jesus Christ was resurrected. If this was some story being told, you would expect the churches to come after generations. But you have it 50 days, a month and 20 days. They're like, yo, we got to make a church out of this. This is true. This is the Messiah. This is the Son of God. He is here. This is the truth. And you see hundreds of people being baptized and converted because they witnessed it. They saw it. They believe it's true. So you have to look at this from that critical view of like, are you really just being overly criticizing it? Are you not looking at this from an intellectual point of view? Are you being honest to yourself, or are you just parroting what you hear from other people because of your ignorance, because you are ignorant to the facts that have happened? I'm not saying ignorant as a derogatory term. I'm saying ignorance. I'm using ignorance because of its definition of not having knowledge of a certain subject. And so most people just don't have that knowledge of this subject. And yet whenever you present all of this, it makes sense that Jesus Christ was real. And he came back, was resurrected. He is the Son of God, the Messiah. And I'm not even talking about Paul. I haven't even mentioned this, bro. Maybe once. I think I mentioned him once. But you have Paul, who persecuted Christians. He made this shit a sport. He said that he liked it so much, he would go to other cities and hunt them down. Hunt Christians down and unalive them. He'd be like, no more breathing for you, because you believe that Jesus Christ was the Messiah, and would kill them. And then he has this road to Damascus moment where Jesus Christ bitch slaps him off his horse and is like, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And my boy Paul, Saul originally, is like, who this? New phone, who this? Who talking to me right now? And Jesus is like, it is me, Jesus Christ, the one who you persecute. And my boy's like, and then goes blind for 3 days. And yet a lot of people argue that it was a seizure. But first of all, one, if you have a seizure in your brain, you don't go blind for 3 days. That's never occurred. So this could be some statistical anomaly. You could give it that, but let's not bet on statistical anomalies. Let's be critical about everything. Other people witnessed this. It wasn't just some event that occurred by himself. Other people saw the light and heard a noise. Didn't really know what it was, but they heard it. And so then you have his whole life be changed because of that. His whole life because Jesus Christ spoke to him. The worst of the worst, the one who persecuted Christians, who would hunt them and kill them, was chosen by Jesus Christ to spread this message. And this isn't just some story that was told about him. He wrote these letters himself. Most of the New Testament is written by Paul, or letters from Paul, of him writing these letters to churches, of stuff that Jesus, revelations that Jesus has shown him, and spreading the message that's occurred. That's insane. Who would ever dedicate their life to something they knew wasn't true? Who would ever dedicate their life to something that, at all, like most people who truly believe they've witnessed something, even are diehard Christians and do feel the Holy Spirit, don't perfectly dedicate their life. And not even perfectly, I think that's the wrong word, but passionately, truly passionately dedicate most of their life to Christianity. And yet you have someone who had power, he had wealth, he had pretty much all he wanted, and yet has this road to Damascus moment, and then completely turns his life around. Just like that. Because he witnessed Jesus Christ. He witnessed the glory of God. And this isn't just a story about him again. Like, this is his own writing. He says this. This is his own personal testimony. That's like as good as it gets whenever it comes to talking about an event, is you're the eyewitness of this. You actually were were the witness. You were the subject of the story. And Paul outlines this all. Gains nothing. He's tortured. He's beaten. He's ostracized. He loses it all for this moment that happened. That's powerful. That is so powerful. Because I don't think he's lying. I think he's telling the truth. I think these things actually occurred, and Jesus Christ truly resurrected on the cross. So I want you to look at this critically. But have criticism to your own criticism, because if not, you're not being intellectually honest. If you're not intellectually honest, then your opinion doesn't hold a lot of weight, because you're just parroting what other people think. You're not actually doing your own research. So I challenge you. Show up. Prove me wrong. Really think about the things that I said. If you made it this far, wow, bro. That's crazy. Hi. Nice to meet you. Your brain's not screwed up. You don't have too much brain rot. But truly, I want you to look at it from this perspective. Look at it from the historical point of view. But remember, wisdom means nothing without change.